Good morning, everybody. It's Trent from L&B Counseling. Welcome to the 5th edition of Behind the Door series. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone is healthy today. Um, I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes, or I guess a minute, for people to hop on. Really appreciated everyone who has looked at all the posts before with the questions, the views. It's always nice to have people on the live part. And but I realize everyone can't be here. 11 o'clock sometimes is a tough time. If there's a better time, let us know. But I really appreciate everyone just going and watching the videos, and hopefully we are helping educate y'all about some of the techniques that we do. It's part of breaking the stigma of counseling, which is kind of our brand. And hopefully you'll continue to get some things out of it. For today, I know last week I said I was going to talk more about the habit loop. I'll talk about that next week on our sixth one. But today I just wanted to talk more about COVID and how it's has been impacting our mental health. And just give some perspective of why, and then maybe what some suggestions for things that you could do either for yourself or for your child, your adult child, your adolescent, your kiddo, to help things feel a little bit more certain. So we'll just give everybody just another minute, and then we'll get rolling. Click over here to the questions in case there are any questions. Always love the questions. It makes it more interactive. And we're considering or tinkering around with maybe doing something on Zoom to do more of a webinar style format. Today we didn't have any, there's no notes or things to accompany the talk, but usually there is, and we try to add visual aids just because it's a good reference point. And this will be up on the website later today, and we'll send it out through the social media feeds so everyone has access to it. But why don't we get started? So like I said before, I just want to talk a little bit about COVID-19, what's been going on maybe the last 3 months with the mental health of yourself or your loved ones, or even just kind of going on in the community. I first heard this from, and I may mispronounce his last name, so I apologize, but Simon Sinek. He's an anthropologist by trade, but has become like more of a motivational speaker. He's written several books called The Why, Leaders Eat Last, and then The Infinite Mindset. All great books. I recommend all of them. They're very interesting. He's an incredibly positive guy. But how it relates to our talk is he said there's 4 fundamental neurochemicals that allow us to be successful and give us the best opportunity to be productive and feel good. They are dopamine, which is more of your goal-centered neurochemical. So when you do something hard, challenging, you get a little shot of dopamine. You get dopamine from sometimes being on your phone, sometimes playing video games. You get it from drugs and alcohol as well. But evolutionary perspective is you do something hard and it rewards you, which makes you want to continue to do it. So it serves a good purpose. So you've got dopamine, you've got endorphins, which is what you get from exercising. It's the neurochemical that's secreted, so your muscles, when they're breaking down, it will allow you to continue to push. It's kind of a blocker that allows you to continue to do the exercise. Otherwise, if it hurt that bad, you may stop sooner than maybe you need to. There's serotonin, which is what you get when you're in social settings with people that you like to be around. It's what happens when you make a joke and people laugh at you, or laugh with you, excuse me. Hopefully they don't laugh at you. Or if someone makes a joke and you laugh at it, you're getting serotonin. It's what makes it feel warm. And then oxytocin is the neurochemical that you get from love, from touch, from belonging. And so that is a very powerful neurochemical. It's almost as powerful as cortisol, and sometimes it's stronger than cortisol. So what we're talking about today is gonna be based upon those kind of four neurochemicals. So if you think about COVID and what happened, and it happened very abruptly, there was no planning for us. A lot of dopamine went away. So whether it's you or your kids that were in school, especially the kids, they stopped having to do things that were hard and challenging, especially for the first month until the school systems figured out, most school systems anyway. So they lost some of their ability to gain dopamine. Um, and it never really recovered for the most part because school never was all that challenging. There were moments, but it wasn't a 7 day or 7 hour slug like it is or was that gave them dopamine. Even for classes they didn't like, they would do something hard and maybe get a good grade or even do well in a particular activity or have to get up in front of the group and talk. Those are all things that give you dopamine. And it's true for our college students. It's true for the adults. Like everything changed, and while you're still working from home, and some of those things are still challenging, you may not be getting the dopamine that you were getting. So when your dopamine levels drop, it makes you more susceptible to depression. The disruption in schedule, the even now, the closures of our gyms are ways that we would regularly exercise and work out. Those have been taken away. So it became a lot harder to get endorphins. It became a lot harder to get endorphins because you couldn't just go out and work out, especially if you had little kids. Everything revolved around their schedule rather than yours, and so your priorities, you weren't able to prioritize yourself. So you had a dip in dopamine, you had probably a significant dip in endorphins and being able to exercise and do things. And people that are training for certain things, and I can see specifically for myself, I was training for a race in Labor Day, and they had to cancel the race, and that's been true up and down. People that are runners, and I'm more of a runner, they just canceled the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon. So a lot of these things that people were kind of had their sights set on because of the disruption in the schedule, they had to stop doing, or just didn't have access to it. And they still don't in a lot of cases. I know some of the like the Y's getting creative, and some of the other gyms are getting creative by trying to do things outside, and that's wonderful. But if it's a day like today where it's been raining, it becomes tougher to do. Um, so you're missing your endorphins as much, you're missing your dopamine as much. You certainly, I think, with the population that I see a lot of the college students and high school students, um, they got stripped of their serotonin. You don't get the same serotonin texting, FaceTiming, Snapchatting, whatever the platform is that they're using. You don't get the same amount of serotonin when we're doing this, when we're just doing video chatting. And it's specifically for teenagers and young adults, serotonin is vital. It's what lights them up, and they need it. They're geared towards it for an evolutionary perspective of like they are seeking their peers, and that's part of that breakaway from the parent structure where they boomerang back around at some point when they get into young adult or mid to late 20s, where they kind of come back to the parent in a sense. But all that got disrupted. Um, if you're an adult, your ability to interact with other people, maybe you're in a small group in your church, maybe you volunteered on the weekends, maybe you just got together for dinner club, book club, you name it, all of that was taken away. And while, yes, you could do some things over Zoom and some of the other platforms, it's not the same. It's not the same as being in person. Like I said, it's not as funny when you're watching something over Zoom or listening to something over Zoom, because sometimes you're looking at yourself in the camera rather than listening to what's going on, or there's more distractions. So the serotonin has been diminished. The opportunities for serotonin have been diminished. And when that happens, that also makes you more susceptible to depression. And then lastly, oxytocin, which is that love neurochemical that you get. So the ability, and it's still the case right now, the ability to touch other people, and even give a high five or fist bump, like you get oxytocin from that. That builds intimacy. And since we're not sure what's okay, not okay, and that world changes, and that causes cortisol at a fundamental level, like we've talked about before, and how that interacts with those other neurochemicals being a bully. but you're not getting the oxytocin or the level that you were getting, especially our teens and young adults who were in all these kind of social circles and getting a lot of these neurochemicals. It's really impacted them and the adults, because we're not able to do the things. Even if you're an introvert, you still need oxytocin, you still need serotonin. You might not need it as often, but you still need it. And to remove the ability to gain it at any point in time on a daily basis is going to have consequences. And I think that's some of what's going on right now, especially stuff that I'm seeing in all my clients, ages 16, 15, 14, all the way up to people in their mid 30s that I see predominantly, is that they're not getting these things. And so a natural byproduct to this kind of sociological change in our culture is causing those brains to experience things that they've never experienced before in their life. Um, and so it's a hard adjustment, and it's been a slow incremental decline rather than a very quick like traumatic event that would cause those levels to drop quickly. So I say all that just from a kind of a neurochemical standpoint to kind of give some perspective of possibly what may be going on. It could be one day that you experience this, or it could be 1 hour you experience this, or it could this could be something that's lingering that you're struggling with. Um, so that gives you some background to what's occurring and maybe why it's occurring. The next part that I want to cover is what you can do. I think what we know is that if you can get outside, if you can feel some sun, if you can exercise, be in nature, there's some ways to boost your dopamine back up. Exercising is your endorphins. Doing something hard when you exercise, you get dopamine after it. Um, if you can do it with someone else, then you're getting serotonin and possibly oxytocin. So there's ways to get these. You can get dopamine and you can get endorphins on your own. You don't need anyone else around, but you need people around for the serotonin and the oxytocin. But there's ways to combine them if you want. The biggest challenge that I've seen right now from a dopamine perspective is people are on calls and they're having to do things necessarily in a different way, and that adjustment has been tough, but they're not doing things that, the expression I use is that tickles their brain. They're not doing things that are interesting but hard. They're not learning. They were in a growth mindset and they may have stopped doing some of those things on a daily basis, or they've just stopped pursuing new interest. And that has consequences. But if you can do those things, or even start to learn to do those things, or maybe it's learn how to cook a special meal, or pick up a new talent, maybe it's to play an instrument, maybe it's to get outside and do something that you haven't done before, maybe it's woodworking. But doing things that you can be interested in and maybe become passionate about will give you energy because it's giving you dopamine. You're doing hard stuff and it feels good when you do it. Endorphins are, it's part of that schedule that we talked about a couple weeks ago. You've got to put it in your schedule. You got to figure out a time that you can go work out and get your heart rate up. And whether that's in the morning before the kids wake up, or midday, or if you can trade off if you have a spouse or a significant other with you, or even do something in one room while your kids are entertained with something else in the other room. Whatever it is, it can be yoga, Pilates. We put a lot of things out in articles that people are giving away for free. Exercises, workout places. So there's an abundance of information out there. People are doing really great about giving away free content and free exercises. You just got to use Google and go find it. But you got to get those endorphins. Now, admittedly, serotonin is more of a challenging thing because, like I said, it'd be better to do it in person. But you gotta have those conversations. You can't do these things over text. You miss nuances, you miss tone, you miss volume. You're reading it in your voice. You're not reading it in their voice. So, depending on your mental state, you may be misinterpreting something that was a joke and you're taking it as an offense. So you need to actually have an old school phone call, or you can do something over FaceTime, Zoom, whatever. But it needs to be something where you're hearing inflection, and therefore you can hear the subtleties in what people are saying and how they're saying it. It allows you to have better conversations. It allows you to have funnier conversations. If you can get out and you can socially distance and do the precautions that you need to do, that's ideal. Um, if you can do that with your kiddos or your teenagers, and I'm strongly encouraging my guys that are home from college, you got to be able to access your network to, at a minimum, have conversations, but two, hopefully be able to get out and meet in person. Um, if everyone's safe and healthy. And that serotonin piece is so vital, especially for our teenagers and young adults. They need to feel connected. It's the thing that causes the cliff to drop very quickly when it comes to depression. So, challenging yourself or challenging your children to be able to access their networks as much as they can. And then the oxytocin piece just kind of flows from that. You need to make sure that you hug each other. You hug each other in your family. You touch each other. You tell each other that you love one another. It's very vital that you get that so you can get that chemical pop, which is so powerful for the brain when you feel that love. So, lastly, the things that I would encourage you to do is across those four neurochemicals. So think of dopamine, think of endorphins, think of serotonin, and think of your oxytocin. I would encourage you to come up with a very specific goal for each one of those. So figure out something that you're going to do that's hard, something that's going to take some effort and energy, and it's not you're not going to get to it quick, and set that as your goal. Be very specific. So, for instance, I am going to learn how to code, and the goal would be to learn how to code a video game. So that would be my dopamine goal. My endorphin goal would be I'm going to work out 3 times a week for 30 minutes per day. My serotonin goal is I'm going to have a real in life conversation with someone that I can either hear or see once a day. And then your oxytocin goal could be that I am going to hug someone in my family once a day for X amount of seconds, as much as if you're a parent, as much as your kids will allow you, but just to get that contact. So that's just an example of a couple things you could do, how they work, how they're impacting our brain, maybe some of what's going on right now, because there's a lot of uncertainty. And to be quite honest, we don't know when the new normal is going to start when COVID goes away. Um, and I know there's a lot of angst and anxiety about what's going on across the country and in our state. And these are some ways that you can have some management over your own kind of domain and feel more in control of your life despite how things are changing outside of it. So hopefully all this stuff was helpful. Hopefully it made sense. I've got one question, uh, just talking about anxiety over COVID. When it comes to anxiety, the tool that we use that I've talked about before, I think I talked about in the first behind the door, is it's the shoulder technique. And you've got to separate what's real versus what's not real. Um, and what's real is a worry, and what's not real is anxiety. And then you've got to decide, do you want to just kind of zone out and not think about it, which you use your tools to break away from it. It's switching, and we'll talk more about this next week, but there's a switch. You just need to think of it, and it can only focus on one thing. And if you switch it to focus on, let's say, a YouTube video, well, now it's not focused on the thing that's causing cortisol, which is irrational fear. So you're using a tool just to kind of step out of that space, that emotional space, and step into a different space that's more pleasing. Or, like we talk about, ultimately you kind of have to fight, which is listen to the left shoulder, which says there's no evidence that there is something occurring right now. Now, I know with COVID, it creates some tricky situations. That's why you have to kind of take it line by line when we're evaluating our facts. Like, yes, these things are occurring. Are these the things occurring in my community? Are these things occurring in my neighborhood? Are these things occurring in my house? So you break it down to a place where you can feel some sense of control and safety. And then you can decide, all right, what do I need to do to challenge myself to move up to the next level? And that may be, for some people, walking outside. I've had some kids that I worked with who have been fearful of even going outside of their house. So we had to establish, mastery over the house and the anxiety in the house before we could say, all right, now it's time. Let's take a walk outside around your house, because we could establish that there, if it was safe in the house, it was safe around the house. So we let that left shoulder do the talking for us, when the right shoulder is wanting to tell us all this scary stuff that could happen when we don't have any evidence or proof that that could happen. So that's one way to tackle COVID. It's part of our process, and it's one that all of our therapists use. And it's applicable to COVID just like it is anything else. Like there's storms outside and lightning's going to get me, or you know I can't live without my mom if she leaves. So it doesn't matter what the anxiety is, because the shoulder technique is designed to help you eradicate all of it, through separating what's real and what's not real. One other question, you said serotonin can be increased through phone calls or Zoom. Yes, they can, because versus text, I think you're assuming text, or saying text or Snapchat, or whatever the platform is. Yeah, you're going to get more serotonin from seeing someone. I can't see y'all, but you can see me. You're just going to get more serotonin that way than, because you can see facial expressions, you can understand nuances, you can detect sarcasm, you can hear tone and volume, and realize that that was a funny statement rather than a critique. Um, so phone calls are great. I listened to something today. Phone calls might be better because this little box over here in the corner that we're always in causes us to be self-conscious about our presentation and how we're looking. It's not something that we're going to be able to get rid of. I don't think I can get rid of this box. But so there's some thought on just old school phone call, could be great. As long as you're not on your phone scrolling through stuff and looking at other stuff, it's meant to be, present and intentional when you're having that phone call. And it's something that our youth aren't all that great at. So in a weird way, it'd be a nice challenge for them to be able to do something that they haven't done and just get better at it. So yeah, serotonin through Zoom, through FaceTime, through a phone call is much, 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 much better than through a text or reading a feed or all those things. I mean, not to get too outside of the scope of what we're trying to do, but a lot of people have stopped or have forgotten how to talk to one another and how to have a conversation and how to have exchange of ideas. And it's just it's taglines and one hit uh, against people's message, and so it doesn't allow for good conversation. So having a phone call or doing something like Zoom or FaceTime allows for a good conversation. So thank you for those questions. I'm going to give it maybe another minute, and after that, we'll wrap up. Next week, on the Behind the Door series, I promise that I will talk about the habit loop, which is also just kind of getting into how the brain develops, how we become what we become, and why we become those things. And it's just neural pathway development. So we'll talk more about that next week, and there'll be some handouts that accompany it. But like I said, I really appreciate y'all coming. I really appreciate y'all watching the Behind the Door series. If there are other topics that you're interested in, I've got a couple that I'm going to do for the next couple weeks. But obviously, if something comes up, I can replace that. It's no big deal, kind of like I did today. It's just one way that we try to break the stigma of counseling by showing you what we do, how we do it, the science that we're using to make these decisions and use the techniques that we're using. So, and we all use it, and it's pretty awesome stuff, and we're very proud of it. So thanks again. Thanks for being here. Y'all have a great Thursday and a great weekend, and stay healthy and safe.